I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? All right, so
Hello, my
I'm
friend.
here. What you want to talk about? What you want to talk about today?
No, there's so many things. There's so many things. I don't know. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and we were talking about war, and then
Mm.
a thought came into my mind, and I'm sure it's not an original thought, but that the concept of that war is not about, I think I've always thought about war as wanting to make change. Like somebody wages war against someone else because, or an entity or a nation wages war against another nation because it wants to create some level of change. And the thought came to my mind that it's not, and maybe that is the case, like on the surface, but it seems to me, or my thought process is changing, that war is more about maintaining status quo than it is about creating change. And I have not explored that any more than that. So I might totally debunk myself just in the first 5 minutes. But
But what do you mean by maintaining the status quo?
so when I think about wars that have been in my consciousness during the course of my lifetime, I think I always thought that they were waged because somebody was trying to change something. But the more I'm kind of unpacking and learning more about the military industrial complex and learning more about the way the US specifically has waged war in other lands, some of it is about change, maybe because they want to debunk, they want to dethrone somebody, they want regime change, they want, but, or we want, I suppose I should say we. But I feel like it's more about maintaining the status quo. Like when I think about what Israel is doing
Mm.
in occupied Palestine and how they're bombing other, like they just bombed Syria, Damascus, like a couple of days ago for no apparent reason, except we know what the reasons are. It feels like they're doing all of this aggression because they want to maintain their status quo. And it just kind of upended it for me. And maybe it's a both and, maybe it's not one or the other, but I guess I was challenging my own mindset and thinking about how, and maybe there probably was a time where I glorified war on some level, where I thought that I used to fall for that teaching that the US was just trying to promote democracy in, uncivilized areas in the world and trying to spread this wonderful thing called democracy. And that has all gotten, unpacked and debunked in my brain in the past, 10, 15 years. So anyway, that was just something that I feel like I was shifting in my heart and in my mind, that maybe that's why we keep living in war all the time, because we're just trying to maintain the status quo, which is our illusion or non-illusion of power. And that's kind of where I'm curious
Okay,
what
so
your thoughts on
so I'm
that.
still no, that's fine. So I'm asking again because I'm trying to really understand. I don't know what you mean by the status quo. Like, what is the status quo that's trying to be maintained? So I heard your example talking about Israel in Palestine, and um, how would you define their status quo? Because I'm not sure what that looks like. I know that they have Israel erected there in Palestine, but what is their status quo? Because they are aggressing, because they do want to take more land, and they do want the land to be occupied by their people and their faith beliefs and their economies and all of those type of things,
Yeah,
right? And so that still is creating change for me in my understanding. That
true.
is creating change with the condition. And I'm thinking from the aggressor's standpoint. And as a person who was born in the United States, the aggressor's standpoint is again trying to understand what status quo would look like, even in the creation of the United States, right?
Yeah.
The change was happening. There was a revolutionary war that happened, with England to be able to have like what folks wanted as far as what they considered freedom and liberty from England and Britain and all of that kind of stuff. And then France, Europe, from Europe, let's just
Yeah.
say in particular.
Yeah.
So I really want to understand what status quo looks like and war and change. The reason why I understand that we stay in war and change is because we are cultured to violence.
Mm.
We are cultured to violence as the way to make things happen, fear as the way to make things happen, and to the way to make things happen the way you want them to happen. And the status quo is the status quo that I would understand and thinking about it is you having the things that you want to happen,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, but that changes somebody else's reality in its entirety.
Mm.
Even if we're talking about pushing forth this idea, right, this ideology about democracy, because we really haven't seen democracy in its pure form being practiced anywhere in the world. It's interesting because folks talk about communism and socialism and everything like that and how that never works. But democracy also has not worked because it has not existed in its pure form where it's for the people, by the people making decisions about how it is that they want to exist in the world. And if that is happening somewhere where I'm not aware of it, there might be some remote place where folks, are really represented by people in a healthy way,
Yeah.
you know, and the resources that everyone needs are being able to be met,
Mm.
and it's done in an equitable way across. But we haven't seen that. And my idea of democracy is that that's what, representation of the people, where you're really actually, achieving kind of the goals of the community and the mindset of the
Mhm.
community. I think about war and I think about different ways that you can be present with your ideology, and I think about hard power and soft power.
Mhm.
Hard power is like the aggressive, violent way that the US uses as its primary mechanism. And
Mhm.
then the soft power, which was happening for a while, where you invest in other places, you make sure that folks that need things are able to have the things that they need, like when we are sending aid and all of that kind of stuff to other countries, and things like that. Then that's building soft power to be able to build relationships. And then as our technology exists, we begin to develop a global economy and figure out what that looks like as far as like sharing resources. So like, yeah, if we're sending aid, there's some thing that we're taking from the people that we're sending aid because we
Right.
see some value in the space that they're in.
Right.
Let's not be fooled about that at all. Um, and what we're seeing, if we're talking about hard power and soft power, I live on an island, and so I'm seeing what's happening as far as change goes, right? And there's no war happening. I would be really curious to see what war would look like in One Love, Jamaica. I really would be curious to
Yeah,
see what that
that's
looks like
interesting.
from the global community, because
Mm.
I live in a place now where people come to be happy, where people come
Mm.
to enjoy the land and the space. So there the revolution or any type of war situation would be happening from internally for those folks that don't have all of the things that they need and are like, seeing how resources are being shared across the island.
Right.
But I say that to say I'm also seeing soft power relationship building specifically with China, because there's a whole history of Chinese Jamaican from when people migrated here a long time ago. And so you'll see, like, I know that I have Asian in my background, and my hue undertone is a little yellow, my eyes are a little slanted, a thing like that. So, but truthfully, I have Asian folks in my great grandmother. But I'm watching China coming by that they had like the bauxite which is one of the major mineral resources. They did some negotiation with the government. I'm seeing them build the land, the roads across the land. And as that's happening, more folks from China are coming over. I see them erecting malls, strip malls, and things like that. So really emerging themselves into the community and the culture of the people. Now, it's not always what we would consider growing up in the US as something that is appropriate. Like everybody, when you're here on the island and you go to one of the Chinese stores, everybody is referred to as Mr. or Mr. Chin, regardless or not, if that's your name. So,
Mm.
and the folks who are Asian I don't see them, they probably gets on their nerves, it would get on mine, but I don't see them responding to that. They just, you know, are allowing that kind of acculturation because they're doing economic development and processing and just being merging themselves into the culture in the way that the culture has accepted them. Like that's the way that I understand it. Just from my point of view, because I don't like calling people Mr. and Mrs. Chin. I said, oh, when I go to the Asian markets, not when I go to Mr. and Mrs. Chin, which is what any other Jamaican would say.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
But thinking about that, and also thinking about the United States having this major competition with China, because China is being very effective in developing relationships with other countries that need to develop or come into technology or do whatever that country is looking forward to, that they're building this relationship with China, and the United States is getting frustrated by that.
Hmm.
But the way that I'm seeing it being done, I don't know what the news is. I don't hear about China aggressing a space, but I do hear about China being very present and building infrastructure in a space. And that is the thing that's causing a lot of competition for the United States, because they're seeing how effective that is. And like when we have effective models, I'm curious as to the point that you were making is that, we stay in war in a very violent and aggressive way. And that then leads me to thinking that that is just because that is the undergird culture of
Well,
the
and that's the
way that
moneymaker. That's the
the
moneymaker.
money, it's money maker, and then it's also culture that you think that that is kind of like when we were talking about on one of our other episodes, when you get to a space where punishment and violence is the way that you have existed, and so you continue to move in that because you don't know anything else. You don't
Mhm.
think about other ways of existing
Right.
to get what it is that you want to push forward as quickly. And war is not quick. So like
Mm.
war is not quick. And then the outcomes of war, besides making money for the folks who are, aggressing in the war, because you have to have, well, yeah, the missiles, the guns, you have to move all of the military equipment and all of those things
Right.
that it takes. So yeah, so like that, still this understanding of like trying to maintain the status quo or trying to make change. I'm always seeing it as you're making change, whether or not it's hard or soft power. You are creating change in another place that benefits you,
Yeah.
with this idea, with this war, with this
Yeah.
strategy with war.
I really appreciate that because like I said, it was a fleeting thought that I hadn't fully unpacked, and I appreciate the breaking down of that status quo label, because you're right, change is happening regardless, and so whose status quo are we trying to maintain? And I think what you were saying about, and the light bulb that went on for me was, and maybe this is what I was thinking of by status quo, but wasn't using the right language, is
Mhm.
it's the power dynamic, the aggressor and the money that the aggressor makes off of the aggression.
Mhm.
And like you were saying, when our society sees everything, when we all we have is a hammer, everything we see everything is a nail. And that's how a society that was born and developed on stealing land from others, off of genociding others to take what was not theirs, is obviously that's our hammer, right? And so yeah, I you're right, change does happen regardless. So it's not, so status quo is not the right, I guess that's not the right phrasing, but the maintaining the power, maintaining the illusion of dominance, as well as the actual dominance over other societies and other lands. I mean, I'm hearing a lot about the leader in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, who
Yes.
has said, "I'm done," and and kicking out all of the colonizers, the French dominantly, and saying that our resources are ours. And Mali has
Good.
followed suit. I was listening and listening to some podcasts about Mali this morning. and how they took back all their gold from a Canadian gold mining company and said, they just picked up all of this bullion and moved it and said, you don't get to have access to this anymore. And the company, of course, is flipping out. I also appreciate what you were saying about how China is moving in a way that is rewriting the script of what, we hear the term soft power and hard power, and their soft power game is really good. And yeah, and
Yeah.
they're slipping in. And I'm also seeing, videos of
You don't want to say slip it in.
Huh?
We don't want to
What?
say they're slipping in. That could be heard as a little bit. They are present.
Yes, they are present. They are present. But also other superpowers that maybe this country, the US in particular, would have a problem with. I'm seeing Putin sitting at the table with President Traore, who is, they're working together, I had a visceral reaction when I
Oh, I
first.
didn't know about that.
Yeah, I had a visceral reaction when I saw Putin, engaging with him, and I thought, after 57 years of indoctrination, that Russia bad. And I don't think Putin is a good guy. I'm not saying that he is, but I was challenged to challenge my own training when I saw them sitting down together. And I thought, well, why not?
Hmm.
If Russia is willing to work with Traore in a way that is not the same as we have done, in a way that, that he would like to dictate in terms of keeping the resources that his country provides into his country to support his own people, then who am I to get pissed at that, right? I don't dig the way Putin moves through space. I don't like the way he does things. I don't like the fact that he's, interred as president for until he dies at this point. I'm not in agreement with any of that, but I had to challenge myself and my own gut reaction seeing President Traore working with Putin to go, you know what, but why would he want to work with us? Why would he want to work with, I mean,
Hmm.
just breaking down all of those indoctrination and training points that I've had all these years. And so, yeah.
Do you know what they were meeting and having conversations about? Did you do a deeper dive in
I
any
mean,
way?
I don't know that
Not
I,
to put you on the spot because I don't
yeah,
even
no,
know.
and I don't know
Yeah.
that I would speak to it wholly intelligently, but I believe that he was having conversations with Putin about supporting the efforts that he's doing within his own country. Now, what the framework of that support looks like, I don't
Mm,
know that I could speak to specifically. But he's completely changing the game, as is the other members of their new alliance on the continent. And Mali is the latest country to stand in that space and say, no, you're not going to take our stuff anymore. It's going to come into our own country. It's going to benefit our own people, and we don't need to talk anymore. And Canada's like, so
hmm.
so yeah, I really appreciate that, just that deeper dive into what that framework is. It's not about status quo, I guess, maybe as much as it is about, or that's maybe not the right languaging, but I feel like it's about the powers trying to maintain their power and maintain their holdover and maintain. But I really appreciate China's game right now in terms of coming into countries that are seemingly trying to break away from the typical power structure that they've been oppressed under, and say, how can we help? Which is
Hmm.
going to end up building, their power, or
Hmm.
maybe it's not about necessarily building their power. Maybe it is, but maybe it's also about helping others build their power. I mean, I can't speak to
Yeah.
what China's thinking. So.
Yeah. I have no idea I have no idea what the end game of China's strategy
Right,
is.
right.
They are particularly present in a larger demographic,
Yes.
and there's a system of reliance, that is being developed.
Hmm.
So the hope and the thing that I would watch for is again kind of how they're gaining more position, how China or any of those economies are gaining more position in the land, and then whether or not their expectation is going to be, and this is what the United States does, whether or not their expectation is going to be that the places that they are building infrastructure will then operate in the way that they want and in the culture that they want, right?
Right.
Because I think that that's when you get the imbalance, or that's when you come into this like other concept of war, because
Mhm.
okay, now I'm so present, now I have the power to be able to create a different level of change where I'm saying you're going to operate in whatever economic structure we're choosing for it to operate, because now we have more power over you.
And
So
I make
there's
it dependent on me so that I can wield that power, come in
yes.
like, this is just about me helping you. And then it's, pulling the strings. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, in our capitalist driven society, greater society, world society, I, I, I don't know if I hold out a lot of hope that that's not what China's endgame might be, but who knows? Maybe there would be maybe that's what needs to happen to try to birth this new way of internationally, globally interacting with each other in a more humane, less violent, less extraction based way. And maybe they could drive that new way of being into place. I don't know.
My Afrofuturistic mind says that these lines that we've created are really going to shift, because it's really going to be about how it is that we are going to negotiate. And I think I bring this up a lot with technology.
Yeah.
What the human connections are doing when
Hmm.
they have to like all say, look, we got to band together and figure out how it is that we are going to deal with the how technology is developing a lot faster than we are, and we are creating more technology that then at some point could get to like the Tesla cars that decide that they're going to not drive on the road
Yeah.
and stop. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's no human control over that. And the more that we give over our actual human control, like if we come back to ourselves, like as the place to see the way change is looking, the more power we give over to someone else or something else, the
Hmm.
less that we are able to control. And we get so comfortable with what is easy for
Yeah.
us. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, I think that that's what it's going to come down to, more than us looking at like what human aggression and power over looks like when have given away so much power to technology and become so reliant on technology. That
That's
is where that's what I see in the future is more going to be much more important for us to be thinking about,
true.
as far as like our kind of global relations. And that really is going to shift. I mean, it is shifting how capitalism is existing, because now they're trying to, as I understand, shift us into our trade values and all that stuff being through digital dollars and bitcoins and all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Where actual paper cash, which is just a debt note, that is less valuable than having a credit card or having something that you can, you know, hit
Right.
to a machine somewhere and hope that the machine is taking the right money out and all of this. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, right. I want to circle back real quick before we close for today about you had asked about the idea of if we're talking about what's happening in occupied Palestine and what's happening with Israel and the war that they have besieged the people of Gaza and the people of the West Bank with as trying to maintain a status quo, whether or not that was the status quo or it was they were trying to affect change.
Yeah.
And I want to say out loud that I feel like it's both. The status
Hmm.
piece is their dominance of that part of the world. Their intention to take Palestine from the Palestinians and to establish Israel, which we know Israel does exist in over almost the majority of the land now.
Yeah.
But they're so that part of it is what I was thinking about when it came to status quo, their dominance over another people, namely the Palestinians. And then to your point, the change that they're wanting, which is to drive all of the Palestinians out of what they call Gaza now, and out of the West Bank, and to, extricate and displace them into neighboring countries, anywhere that they can go other than there, so that they can finish that land grab. So, so yeah, I think it's a both and I just wanted to circle back to that to speak to that point, because I think, they're bombing the neighboring countries as well for a reason, because once they get rid of all the Palestinians, the intention is to keep expanding that state of Israel into neighboring countries and neighboring lands. And so, it's not going to stop with the Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, and when we think about war and power over and aggression in that way, it never stops, right?
No.
It like it's continuous,
Yeah.
and until you get Burkina Faso and you're saying now it's going to stop, you know?
May we wrap him in energetic bubble wrap to keep him safe. I'm so
Yeah, if we can
worried
keep them
about
alive.
it. Huh?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, if we can keep them alive.
Yeah.
So to your point about status quo, because when there is somebody that is shifting with those who are in power,
Mhm.
shifting their agenda, that is a threat. And
Yeah.
of course, eliminating threats is like one of the other impetus for people to go into war.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I do think war is an addiction, just like anything else. The
Mm,
violence is an
mm, definitely.
and we get we think we have to have it when it becomes our fuel. And this is kind of funny now that I'm saying this, is making me think of something. So lately, my partner and I have taken to watching, and I've been driving this. I've had so much anger built up in me that I've been wanting to watch like super violent stuff. I'm not into horror, but just good storytelling. I need to have that, but the violence has been drawing me in because I've got all this pent up anger and I don't know what to do with it. So
Okay.
watching something super violent, which it sounds completely counterintuitive to myself and the persona that I put out there, but that's where I've been lately. And so we've been watching a lot of shows that are super super violent. And one of our shows that we really like, Foundation, has come back for a new season, and we've started watching it, and it has put us both to sleep. And we we realized last night that part of it was because we've been watching such violent stuff that's like got you
Yeah.
jumping every 30 seconds. I mean, we were laughing.
Yeah.
The show we were just watching was Banshee. We killed all 4 seasons of it very quickly, and it was like every 8 minutes somebody was getting the shit beat out of them. And so
Wow. Okay.
yeah, it was intense, but it was helping me channel, or at least I felt like it was. But now that we are switching gears to a show that's like super quiet and lots of talking, and both of us are falling asleep, and we're like we're not even, because we got so used to the violence. So my point
The
was
violence.
that the addiction is real. The addiction to that
Yeah.
adrenaline, to that need for I mean, I can only imagine what the people of Palestine have been going through after 20 months of continuous bombing. That sense that cortisol, there are chemicals that get released in our bodies that we become addicted to. And I think that drives a lot of our societal addiction to violence, is because and I know people say, oh, the video games, and we're teaching children. And I think that argument is a little too basic, but on the foundation of it, I do think if we desensitize our young people as they're still developing, as their brains are still developing, watching and playing violent video games, that it changes the way their brains work, and which I just think maybe feeds into this kind of global addiction that we have to violence. So,
So yeah, man, I hear you, and I'm also thinking about your example of like watching something because of the way that you're feeling internally,
yeah.
and it's like I remember when I used to be in the classrooms with the young people talking about some of the games and everything that they're saying that they're playing, and they would be like, it's better for me to be doing this on this game than actually doing it outside on the street,
Mm,
right? So, and when you come from a community where the reality of being able to do that out on the street is there, and you hear a young person say that and be able to make that connection,
yeah.
to be able to say, I'd rather be doing this right now and getting this out, whatever it is, there's a biological response and all of that, getting it out in this way.
Yeah.
Um, but the acculturation into having a violent mindset comes from the root of the way that you exist in the culture, not so much playing a video game in my thought process. Because if you're learning that it was okay for us to do this violent thing in this way because what we believe is the right way to exist, this
Mm,
is the only way to achieve that, then, and this is what we're going, this is how we're going to operate. This is when somebody does something that we don't like, we're violently punishing them. We're, you know what I mean? Like, if you're
mhm,
doing continuous violent things in the way that you operate, that is the thing that's more going to acculturate you into being a
mm.
violent aggressor, or also believing that you sit in a position of power, that this is the way that you should behave.
I totally agree with that, and I wonder if it's also a both and, because I think I still wonder, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do know about cortisol and about, the brain developing and I wonder if, and maybe yeah, I just think it's a both, maybe a both and. Not saying I'm not dumping on video games. I mean, I totally get that's where we are. But I do
Mm,
wonder how much it impacts our growing generation when they spend time, when their brains spend time swimming in those chemicals. And I guess what you're saying
mhm.
is that they're not just getting those chemicals from the video games, and so therefore it's not the video games. Is that what you were saying?
Well, not that it's not the video games, and I'm just like saying, like, the root of even that you have access to these super violent video games, right?
Right.
Because
A part of our, yeah,
they've been created, and that the mindset of, like, the themes on these video games come from
your life.
replicating what we actually do in
Right,
the world to one
right,
another.
right.
And so that's why I'm like, with the video, and then you can play video games, but still then turn around outside these video games and be in a healthy, loving, social,
Right,
interactive community and do all of these things that help
right.
to balance what it is that you're experiencing. And to your point, like, thinking about neurology and biology, like, we do exist in these, like, biological responses: fight, fight, you
Yeah.
collapse, freeze, and
Freeze,
those type of
flee.
things.
Yeah.
So if you exist in any of any of those response mechanisms, then that's what you are going to get conditioned into. To
Mm-hmm.
your point, like, yeah, for sure. And a lot of, oh, Palestinian babies. A lot of that is, that's the trauma that can continue to build, because you're always in, you never get to come back to homeostasis with your body,
Right, right,
because you exist in something that is outside of, because you're trying to, how do we say, balance, and trying to balance yourself, so and you exist in something that's outside of, like, what allows you to be existing without it being in some type of biological response,
right. Yeah. Well,
if that makes sense.
thank you for helping me break that down. I
Yeah,
appreciate
and I'm curious, do we break it down? But I think there's just perspectives, because I always believe that everything is a both and, because everyone sits in a different position of how they're experiencing the thing
it.
that's
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Mm-hmm. I think in my brain now, based on our conversation, I think what I was tapping into maybe more so was just a further shift in my brain about the need for war and the need for the systems that we have in place that facilitate this over and over and over in this never-ending cycle. I don't know that I ever truly believed that it was a helpful thing in the world. And for as long as I can remember, when my daughter asked me, "What do you want for Christmas?" I say, "World peace." So I'm not a person who, I'm not a person who's ever been, very excited about war. But I think in the past, I thought that there were times where it was necessary.
Hmm.
And that's changing in my brain for sure. And so, yeah, I think that was the impetus behind that thought process. So I appreciate the deeper unpacking.
Yeah, I'm curious about, I I don't I don't know if there's ever a need for war, like, the concept of war,
Right.
but I do believe that there is a need to protect yourself from those who are going to aggress against you. So sitting in that position, and maybe because I exist more in that position, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna fight back when you come and try to
Hmm.
change my existence.
Right.
So that's not war because that's not the same as war, but it is like I am going to protect what's mine. Um,
Yeah, but we've seen for the past 20 months that that's the hill that Israel's been standing on is, Israel has a right to defend itself. And I mean, I have so much of a
oh,
better understanding of why they had to defend themselves and where October 7th came from to begin with. So even just that statement kind of brings something up in me because it's like
mm,
I hear what you're saying and I totally get that people have the right to defend themselves, but then it's like, okay, but let's look at why you're being aggressed at. Is there a reason why? I don't know. I just feel like it's more multi-layered, and maybe that's where the question
oh gosh,
is, that it's so much more
yeah.
multi-layered than I think I ever really fully understood, and I'm peeling the onion back with the different layers. And so yeah, it's interesting that I have a visceral response to even you saying, if you come for me, I'm going to defend myself. And normally I would be like, absolutely.
Hmm.
So isn't that
Defending yourself is different than aggressing and demolishing and annihilating stuff outside of like what is yours. So
of
like,
course?
okay, you come into my house, right? And trying to harm and hurt me. I'm gonna defend myself here. But then it's crazy when I go out on the block and
Hmm.
then start shooting my neighbors because I'm saying I'm just gonna be like defending myself.
No. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I go down the hill and then I'm like, I'm gonna kill all of y'all too because I'm defending myself. And then I'm gonna put all of my people around. That's not
Not
what we're
defending.
talking
Yeah.
about. We're talking about, coming into my house and like making sure that my land, but not saying I want to exist in this way and I want all of my people and them to exist in this way around me. So I'm getting rid of all of y'all. That's not defending yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's being a violent aggressor.
That part.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard? Why am I
continue to
so
ask yourself,
attached? Why do I give a
Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.